tried to be really clear with them that this is, mom, and different kids understood it depending on their different ages, more or less. But, mom is in this position where she's now a public figure, and there's going to be people who support her and people who oppose her, and that's the way our democracy works. And there's nothing wrong with supporting her, and there's nothing wrong with opposing her. But we have to be firm in the knowledge of who we are, and you don't want to be shaped or influenced by what people you don't know say. You want to be shaped or influenced by the people who you respect and the people who are close to you. So we tried to be really, really clear with them about why we were doing this. We thought it was what we were supposed to do, what might come from it, how it might change their lives, but that no matter what, we would always be there for them. We would always be with them. And I think they got some security from that, knowing that this is a big life change, but our nuclear family is not going to change.
What's doing, everybody? I'm Alec Elise. Thank you for watching First Class Fatherhood. Today's guest on the podcast is Jesse Barrett. Jesse is a lawyer. His wife, Amy Coney Barrett, became just the 5th woman in United States history to become a Supreme Court justice. Jesse and his wife have 7 kids, 2 of which are adopted. 1 has Down syndrome. It's an honor to have him on the podcast today to talk all about it. Get down there, smack that subscribe button, tap the like, and let's jump into it right now with Jesse Barrett on First Class Fatherhood. Joining me now, First Class Father Jesse Barrett. Welcome to First Class Fatherhood.
Thank you. I'm not sure I qualify as a first class father, but glad to be here.
Well, that's what you are on this show. So let's start it right here. How many kids do you have, and how old are they?
So I have 7. The eldest is 19, and the youngest is 9, and they all fall in the middle. I have 4 girls and 3 boys.
Yeah, that's incredible, Jesse. What is like the most popular sports? Are they all into their own different sports, or do they have one that they all kind of cling to? What does the sports programs look like over there?
Sadly, my biological kids got my talents, so they're not super strong at sports. It turns out that 2 of ours who are adopted are a little more athletic than our biological ones. But, we do. We have soccer. We have one who's into some CrossFit training. We have a couple who do track. Some who stumble through tennis. So, we just try to expose them to as many sports as we can. And then if they gravitate to them, that's great. And if they don't, at least they know how to hold a tennis racket when they're adults.
Yeah, very cool. If you could, Jesse, please just take a minute here to hit my listeners with a little bit about your background and what you do.
So I'm an attorney at a law firm in South Bend, Indiana called South Bank Legal. I went to law school where I met my wife, and I clerked for a federal judge for a year and then worked at a couple national law firms and spent the bulk of my career as a federal prosecutor at the U.S. Attorney's Office in South Bend. So I've been an attorney for about 20 years, and the last 3 or so in private practice.
Yeah, really good stuff. And obviously your family got thrust into the spotlight here. Your wife became a Supreme Court justice. And as I was learning about her, as the rest of the country was, I was just so impressed. I said, man, this is the all-American family here. And you have like the Fatherhood Olympics going on over at your house. So I said, I got to reach out. So take us back to the beginning here, Jesse, about how old were you when you first became a dad, and how did becoming a father kind of change your perspective on life?
So our eldest daughter was born when I was 27, after we had been married for 2 years. And, I assume any father will say, second to our marriage, it was the most life-changing emotional event we've had. I remember very specifically waking up the morning after our daughter was born. It had been a sort of a traumatic delivery. And you know how when you wake up, you're still a little bit groggy, you're trying to place where you are. And then it came together, and I realized, oh my gosh, we have this daughter. Emma is her name. And I just remember the emotional reaction I had when I remembered that I was waking up not to having a wife, but to having a wife and a daughter and a family. So, it just, your heart just gets bigger. You have more love. I had a similar experience with my son, JP, who was adopted from Haiti after the Haitian earthquake. And it was a very mad dash to get him after the earthquake happened. And he had never met me, and I was in this airplane with him flying back from Florida to South Bend, and he had just had this traumatic event. His orphanage, the walls had fallen down. He'd been sleeping outside under a tent with guard dogs to protect him in Haiti. He'd been hustled onto a military plane. There hadn't been anyone to explain to him what was happening. He didn't speak English. He only spoke Creole. And so he's just gone through this life-altering amazing set of circumstances at age almost 3. And I remember being on the airplane with him flying home, and just he fell asleep on my lap and just sitting there looking out the window. It was nighttime, looking at the stars and just thinking, what an amazing circumstance it is for this child, and what a privilege it is that, I get to now be his dad. And just the amazing circumstances and turn of events and chain of events that had led to him being on my lap on the way to South Bend, Indiana. And just, the love I had for him and the gratitude I had that, through whatever misfortune, he got stuck with me as his dad, and how I just wanted to do the best I could at it.
Well, yeah, a great story, Jesse. And obviously, he's very blessed to have you as a dad. And I know several people who have adopted, and I think it's just the greatest form of love that a parent can have. I think it's so inspirational to see parents who do adoption. Now, what kind of led you down the path of adoption in the first place? Adopting your daughter, I believe, first, and then what was well, obviously, you just explained it was a pretty different circumstance there. But what was the process like for you, and why did you guys decide to go the route of adoption first time around?
Yeah, it's a good question, Alec. When I look back on it, we didn't set out with some grand plan to adopt from a third world country. Just, we, both of us wanted, I was raised as the only child of a single parent. I always wanted more kids around. My wife is the eldest of 7. She wanted a big family. And, we started having babies. And then we said, well, look, we have the means, we have the ability, we have a family life that we could welcome more kids into. So maybe we should talk about adoption. And we knew some friends who had done it. And then, Haiti was, it wasn't that we set out to specifically adopt from Haiti, but as we started looking at countries, Haiti was close. It was not a difficult country to adopt from when we started the process. And it's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. So we thought, well, if we're going to, welcome a child into our family, why not welcome a child who's coming from a circumstance where they really need it? And, it was a different circumstance with our eldest daughter, adopted daughter, Vivian, who's 17. The process was much smoother and quicker for her. But even with her, she was abandoned at the doorstep of a hospital in Port-au-Prince, in the poorest slum in Port-au-Prince. She was taken into the orphanage. She was fed by basically a modified, kind of like a hamster bottle that you'd use to feed a small pet, because she just didn't have, she was so malnourished and premature, she didn't have the ability to suck on a regular bottle. When we went to visit her, when she was about a year old, child, while we were in the orphanage, one of the children in the orphanage had died. And we honestly weren't sure if she was going to survive until the adoption was complete. So it was really, the process wasn't as long as sometimes international adoptions are, but it was really an emotionally wrenching process. At the time, my wife was pregnant with our second biological daughter, and our oldest biological daughter would pray for Haiti baby and tummy baby, so she kind of became a part of our family, and even before she arrived. So she came at 14 months, and she only weighed about 6 pounds. She was in infant clothes, and she miraculously became a healthy, thriving toddler, and then, grade school age child. And so we decided, sort of on the same rationale, we'd be open to having more kids. Why not adopt again? And if we're going to adopt again, we've done Haiti before, why not do it again? But by that point, the international adoption process had gotten a lot more complicated, both in Haiti and internationally. So the process with our son, John Peter, took over 3 years, and it reached a point where it looked like it wasn't going to happen. So we were just about ready to kind of hang up the spikes and say that this adoption is not going to work because of some bureaucratic hurdles. And then the devastating earthquake in Haiti happened. And we got a call 3 or 4 days after the earthquake. On the same day, we discovered that my wife was pregnant with our 4th biological child on the very same day, saying, your son, John Peter's orphanage is going to be fast-tracked on this sort of emergency program, and you need to be in Florida in 1 or 2 days. We'll let you know to pick him up. And, so we went from having 4 children and thinking we might be done to, in several hours, thinking we're going to have 6 children. And oh, by the way, the 6th child doesn't speak English. We've never met him. And he's just lived through this horrific circumstance. And there was a moment when we had to decide, well, we could back out of this. We didn't sign any papers that, require us to adopt. And, we looked at each other and, that we just couldn't do that. We couldn't, I don't know how good of parents we're going to be to him, but we can't just abandon him, after this horrific situation. So, as I mentioned earlier, a couple of days later, I flew to Florida and picked him up, and brought this scared little boy who didn't speak English into our family, and we didn't speak Creole, so the first months were interesting.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible, Jesse. And one of the things I talk about on my show all the time is the fatherless crisis that we have going on in our country. We got so many kids that are growing up without a father or a father figure in their life. And I think that's leading to the most of the destruction we're seeing in our society here is the fact that there's a lack of fathers, let alone parenting in our country. So it's so inspiring to see taking on children that aren't your own and making them your own. I think it's beautiful. And also, too, I know now that you have a child with special needs requirements as well. And so what walk me through that a little bit. When did you guys find out? Was it during your wife's pregnancy that you found out? And what have been some of the challenges of raising a child with special needs?
So our youngest son, Benjamin, who just turned 9, he has Down syndrome. We learned about a day after birth that he had Down syndrome. So he's our 7th. At the time he was born, our next eldest was, I don't know, she must have been maybe 5 or 6. So he was definitely at the tail end, and we were thinking, we've got 2 jobs, 6 kids, we got a full life, this baby's got to just hop on board and, kind of ride the train with the rest of them because we can't slow our life down. And he was born with Down syndrome, as we learned, and he was in the NICU for 10 days. And it's a scary diagnosis because, there's a lot of misconceptions about Down syndrome, and a lot of the data on Down syndrome children comes from a time in history when they were institutionalized or they didn't have the care that they get now. And so you kind of don't know what you're walking into, and it was scary. But, he's our child. And so it wasn't so much about him. It was more about us. It was about adjusting our expectations. Everybody thinks their child's going to be happy and healthy and, a first-class child, like a first-class father. And just adjusting your expectations. No, our expectations for this child are going to be different. And we're going to have to change our family to accommodate him. And it's not his fault. I mean, he didn't, put us in this position. It's something that we have to do for him. So the first years were difficult, like many Down syndrome children. He was on oxygen. He had to wear a helmet to shape his head, lots of therapy, couldn't walk without supports. And just the process was delayed, all of the developmental gains. And still at 9, he's mostly nonverbal. But he's made great strides. He's potty trained. He goes to school. He understands a lot. He can work a computer really well. So it's been an adjustment, but it's been a good one, And our children, I think Amy said this at her confirmation proceedings. Every one of those kids, if they've asked who their favorite sibling is, they say Benjamin. And our son JP, the son adopted from Haiti, just the other day, someone asked him, when you're having a hard day, what makes you happy? How do you get through that? And he said, honestly, seeing Benjamin is what makes me happy, and that cheers me up. And so it's really been a blessing to our family. It's not a blessing that we would have necessarily thought would be a blessing, and it's not a situation, I think, when we went into it, we would have asked for or wished for. But, I think the Lord has blessed us, and the other kids have embraced him, and we've just tried to love him up. And everybody's at all different places, and you accept where they are. And at the end of the day, I'm sure there will be lots more struggles ahead. I mean, we have had to slow the train down. We need babysitters in ways we didn't used to. But at the end of the day, he's made our family richer, and I'm grateful for him.
Yeah, really great stuff, Jesse. And I was just going to get to that right there because I have 4 kids myself. And a lot of times when I tell people I got 4 kids, they look at me like I got 4 heads, So I can only imagine with a family of 9, it's got to be a lot to manage. And you say you have babysitters, you got both parents are working full time. How do you kind of navigate, your lifestyle with a family of 9? And one thing that's important with my kids, I have 4, is I know how important one-on-one time is with them. So I try to make it a point, whether I'm going to the grocery store, to the bodega, whatever it may be, that I bring a different kid with me each each time. So they, even if it's 10 minutes, they get that one-on-one time. How do you guys kind of manage, a family as large as yours and make sure each kid kind of feels included in that one-on-one time?
Yeah, that's a great question, Alec. And there's seasons in life when it looks different. When Amy was a professor, every semester we would talk about, does it make sense for you to keep teaching? Does it make sense for me to keep practicing? Should one of us start staying home? But we never hit the point where we felt like our kids weren't getting what they needed. And if we felt like they weren't getting what they needed, one of us would have quit the job immediately. Um, so we have been blessed with great babysitters, both family and non-family. We've also had the good fortune of living in a small town like South Bend is, where basically everywhere we go is within about a mile and a half. The schools, the pediatrician, my office, Amy's office, the grocery store, church. So that has made it easier to do it in a place like this. But, it takes a lot of communication. At the beginning of each week, we look at our Google Calendar, which has, 10 different colors going on and multiple blocks colored in at the same time, and figure out who's going to do what. Generally, I do teeth, so I do dentists and orthodontists. Amy does the girls' appointments. Usually I do the boys' appointments. We just, we divide it up, and you sacrifice at work. I mean, that sounds funny to say when Amy's obviously not, she's in the position that she's in. But, we've both at different points probably could have achieved more or done more or billed more time or gotten more clients or what have you, or published more. But, family comes first. And as you mentioned, Alec, with, trying to find the time, the 10 minutes at least, I try to make sure I at least have a conversation one-on-one with each child each day. And, just what's going on, how is school? Especially, and we have family dinner every night. So every night at 6 o'clock, unless a kid's at sport, we have dinner together. And everybody says how their day was, and everybody knows that's kind of where we connect. And even the kids who might be in different life situations or different ages or might not be getting along as well right then, they have to be around the table across from their brother or sister. So the family dinner has really been an important thing for us too. Even if there's not as much chances during a particular day for one-on-one interaction, at least then we can all be together for a half hour or 45 minutes.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm right there with you. We're 6 o'clock every night, like clockwork. We eat together, we pray together before dinner, and it's my favorite part of the day. I love it. I usually cook dinner every night, and it's the most fun that I have during the day is getting a chance to sit down with the family
That's great.
and have a meal. The phones go away, technology is gone, and it's just us at the table. So I definitely appreciate that myself. And what about as far as discipline goes, Jesse? What type of disciplinarian are you as a dad, and is that different than a discipline style you grew up with?
I try to have a light touch. I think that, a stern word often will go farther than a different kind of correction. I had an embarrassing moment not too long ago where I was correcting one of my children, and as I was walking away, I heard that child say to their sibling, "He wasn't even that mad. He didn't even say, 'damn it.'" I was like, "Oh man, I got to watch my language around them." But as they get older, technology is pretty low-hanging fruit for a punishment. If you talk back, if you break a curfew, we'll take your phone. And no teenager, we try to hold off as long as we can on giving our kids phones, but once they get them, they know that we can take them back. So that has proven to be probably our most effective source of punishment. But I have found as we've had more kids, the younger ones kind of know the standard from the older kids, and so sometimes our younger kids have taken less discipline than our older children because sort of the pattern has been set and expectations have been set. So, I think when you get to a family as big as ours are, it's not like every child is as big of a change as the first or second were. They enter something that is already ongoing and existing as opposed to sort of having to recreate everything each time you have a child. So I don't know what they would say about the discipline, but I think we try to have as light of a touch as we can. But that said, they have to know that there's an order and that their parents are in charge, and there's certain things they can and can't say, and they can and can't do. So I think there have to be clear consequences, and I think that makes them happier because then they know if they're doing something that isn't a bad thing, that there's nothing wrong with doing it because our standards and our expectations are clear.
Yeah, very well said. And then, as we mentioned here, your wife became a Supreme Court justice. There's only 9 of them in the country for now, anyway. But it's an awesome position to get for your wife, and obviously thrust you guys into the national spotlight. And some of the coverage was so horrific to see. And I can only imagine being a dad, seeing stuff being reported or being written about your family. How did you guys kind of handle it with your kids? Did you kind of keep them away from media at that time? How did they respond to all the criticism, sometimes harsh, that was coming straight ahead at your family during that time?
The biggest thing we did was to tell our girls who have technology, stay off social media, because that's where you're going to get the anonymous complaints and the people attacking you. You're going to get it other places too, but stay off social media, and they did for the most part, and I think that really helped keep some sanity. We tried to be really clear with them that this is, mom, and different kids understood it depending on their different ages, more or less. But, mom is in this position where she's now a public figure, and there's going to be people who support her and people who oppose her, and that's the way our democracy works. And there's nothing wrong with supporting her, and there's nothing wrong with opposing her. But we have to be firm in the knowledge of who we are, and you don't want to be shaped or influenced by what people you don't know say. You want to be shaped or influenced by the people who you respect and the people who are close to you. So we tried to be really, really clear with them about why we were doing this. We thought it was what we were supposed to do, what might come from it, how it might change their lives, but that no matter what, we would always be there for them. We would always be with them. And I think they got some security from that, knowing that this is a big life change, but our nuclear family is not going to change, and the love and the relationships aren't going to change, no matter what comes from the outside. So I'm sure maybe someday they'll be on a podcast in 20 years and be saying that it was, it was the worst time of their lives, or it was so disruptive, or something like that. But as I look at it right now, I think they're all in pretty good places, and I think that we also had the good fortune of having just a lot of support from very close knit family and friends. So they were able to be kind of cocooned from some of the worst of things. And I think that as they get older and read everything that was written and said, they might be surprised, like, oh, I didn't know that was out there, because I felt like that was really I felt pretty safe and protected during that time.
Yeah, yeah, good stuff. Yeah, and you guys really handled the whole situation with class, I thought, and your wife just really was so impressive during the hearings. It was incredible to find any criticism to come her way, because she was just so impressive during that whole process. So I thought she handled it with class the whole way through, and I think we're blessed to have her as a Supreme Court justice. So, and then I want to ask you, my youngest is my only girl. She's 6 now, so I'm not in any hurry to get to her to hit those stages where the dating scene comes into place. You're already there right now. So how have you kind of handled, or what kind of advice have you given your girls here, or the kids that are old enough to start hitting that dating scene?
Yeah, that's a scary one, Alec. Obviously, every dad will say the same thing, maybe especially with daughters, but with sons too. We have always tried to be really, really open, frank, and explicit with them about, here's the pros and the cons of dating, here's what can come, here's the good things that can come, here's the bad things that can come, here's some heartbreak you can have if you get emotionally involved before you're ready to be emotionally involved, before you have a maturity level to be emotionally involved. And we have really frank conversations around the dinner table, even with the younger kids, about how you pick who you want to date. Is that somebody who you could see being with as a life partner? Is that the kind of person you'd be embarrassed to bring home? Is that someone who you think, if you want to be married, you could have as good a relationship with as the people you respect, who you see who are married, like mom and dad, or your aunts and uncles, or parents of other kids who you respect. And to try to have them have the long view, so that before they get too emotionally connected with somebody, they've made the decision that that's somebody I want to be emotionally involved with. Because, you can just fall into relationships because of convenience, or because, you think someone's cute, or someone's in your class, or what have you. And, that's no way to, I mean, I feel like if they go through their dating life like that, there's just going to be a lot of turmoil and a lot of upheaval, and maybe they'll hit it lucky and one of those boys or girls will be the right one for them. But I feel like if we can teach them to be a little more deliberate about who they choose to spend their emotional energy on and their emotional time on, that maybe it'll go a little smoother for them than it would otherwise. So, look, our oldest is only 19, so it's all the story is yet to be written. But at least ideally, that's kind of the way I've been thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm kind of bracing myself for impact with that too. So I guess prayer is about the best thing I can offer. I mean, unfortunately, we know they have to go through experiences. They have to learn for themselves, no matter how many times we tell them. But just trying to callous my mind for the days ahead with that. So last thing I want to hit you with here, Jesse. I don't want to keep you any longer. I love to ask all the dads that I get on the podcast, what type of advice do you have for that new dad or for that about to be father who's out there listening?
You know, I have found that I've gotten into trouble when I second guess what I'm doing by what the perfect dad would do or what the best dad would do. And, I'm not sure there is a perfect dad. I'm not sure there is a best dad. I mean, I think for me, it's if I don't try to hold myself to some external standard and I get myself down about how I handle a particular situation, but it's just like, I'm going to take the tools and abilities that I have and use that to be the best dad I can. And I'm going to give everything I can, but I can't give something I don't have. There's resources I don't have. There's time I don't have. There's experiences I don't have. I can't teach my kid to be a great golfer because I'm not a good golfer. But that's okay. You give them what you have. And that's really helped me be kind of peaceful with I'm just doing the best I can with the tools the Lord has given me, and that's going to have to be enough. So that's one thing. And I think also, I mean, this is probably so cliche to say, but man, it's all about the example. It's not about what you say. It's about what you do. It's about how you live your life. And who knows when, your child will remember something that you said or did 10 years ago that at the time didn't make an impact. But, as a 25-year-old, they remember, oh, I know how dad handled this situation. I know how mom handled that situation. So I just think the example of how you live your life, how you love their mother, how you care for them is so much more important than all the advice. We're always talking at them, but I think it's the doing that really probably makes a longer term impact.
Yeah, very well said. I love the message. This has been an honor for me. I got to say, Jesse Barrett, you are a first class father all the way, and thank you so much for giving me a few minutes of your time here on First Class Fatherhood.
Thanks, Alec. I really appreciate the service you do through the podcast, and thanks for having me on.